Hey there. Welcome back to Scary Times. The clock just struck midnight, and there's something unsettling about tonight's atmosphere. I've got some terrifying tales that'll make you question every shadow in your room. If you enjoy getting scared, with us, hit that subscribe button and join our haunted family. Now turn off your lights, put on your headphones, and let Scary Times guide you through tonight's collection of spine-chilling stories. My name is Eric. I was born and raised in Taiwan in a small city not far from the mountains. When I was in high school, my friends and I loved to explore strange places. There was an old abandoned hospital on the edge of our city. People said it was haunted. Some even said they heard screams at night or saw shadows in the windows. I never really believed those stories, but I was always a little curious. One summer evening, my friend Jason called me. He said, "Let's go check out the old hospital tonight. I heard there's a way inside." I hesitated, but he kept pushing. Soon our friends Lily and Kevin joined too. We met at the corner store, bought some snacks, and rode our bikes to the hospital. The building was huge and gray with broken windows and weeds growing everywhere. The gates were locked, but Jason found a hole in the fence. We crawled through and walked up the cracked path. The air smelled like mold and something rotten. I felt a chill, even though it was a hot night. We found a side door that was half open. Jason went first, shining his flashlight into the darkness. The hallway was covered in dust and old papers. Our footsteps echoed on the dirty floor. The walls were covered in peeling paint and graffiti. It was hard to imagine this place was once full of doctors and nurses. We walked past empty rooms filled with broken beds and old machines. Sometimes we saw old medical charts or dirty blankets left behind. Everything felt wrong, like the whole building was frozen in time. Lily said she felt like someone was watching us. I laughed, but I felt it too. We climbed the stairs to the second floor. The steps creaked under our feet. Suddenly we heard a door slam somewhere above us. We all stopped and stared at each other. "Probably just the wind," Kevin said, but his voice was shaky. On the second floor, the air was colder. We walked down a long hallway. Most of the doors were shut, but one was open. Inside, we found an old operating room. There were rusty tools on a table and a broken lamp hanging from the ceiling. The walls were stained. I saw something dark on the floor and tried not to think about what it was. Lily took some photos, but her phone kept turning off by itself. Jason joked about ghosts, but no one laughed. Suddenly we heard footsteps above us. They were slow and heavy, like someone dragging their feet. We all froze. The footsteps moved closer, then stopped. We decided to leave, but when we turned back, the hallway seemed longer than before. The doors we passed earlier were now closed. I felt dizzy, like the building was changing around us. Kevin tried to open one of the doors, but it was stuck. We hurried back to the stairs, but now there was a cold wind blowing up from below. We made our way down, but the ground floor looked different. The entrance was gone, replaced by a blank wall. We started to panic. Jason banged on the wall, but nothing happened. Lily started to cry. I tried to stay calm and said we should find another exit. We walked deeper into the hospital. The lights from our flashlights flickered. Shadows moved in the corners of the rooms. Sometimes, I thought I saw someone standing at the end of the hallway, but when I looked again, there was nothing. We heard whispers, soft and sad, coming from behind closed doors. We found a room filled with old hospital beds. Some of them looked like they had been used recently. There were dirty sheets and pillows. I heard a soft humming sound like someone singing a lullaby. The others heard it too. We turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind us. We were trapped. The humming grew louder. I saw a shape moving between the beds. It looked like a woman in a hospital gown, her hair long and covering her face. She moved slowly, almost floating. Her feet didn't touch the floor. She whispered something, but I couldn't understand the words. Lily screamed. The woman turned toward us. Her face was pale and empty, her eyes black holes. She reached out her hand. I felt the air grow cold. Kevin grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the window. We tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Jason shouted, "Leave us alone." The woman stopped. She tilted her head, as if she was listening. Then, She let out a long, sad cry. The lights flickered and went out. We were in total darkness. I could hear her moving closer. Suddenly, the door opened by itself. We ran out, not looking back. The hallway was different again. Everything was darker. The walls were wet, and there was a smell like smoke and burned plastic. We ran down the hall, turning corners, trying to find a way out. We ended up in the basement. The stairs were broken, and the floor was covered in water. There were old wheelchairs and boxes stacked in the corners. We heard footsteps behind us. The woman was following. I felt her cold breath on my neck. We found a door that led to a storage room. We squeezed inside and pushed some boxes against the door. We sat in the dark, trying to catch our breath. Lily was shaking. Kevin was crying. Jason tried to call for help, but there was no signal. We waited for what felt like hours. Sometimes we heard the woman whispering outside the door. She called our names one by one. I closed my eyes and prayed she would go away. Finally, the whispers stopped. We waited a little longer, then slowly moved the boxes and opened the door. The hallway was empty. The air felt lighter. We walked carefully back up the stairs. This time, the entrance was there. We ran outside into the night. We didn't stop until we reached the street. We promised never to go back to the hospital. For days after, I had nightmares about the woman. Sometimes I heard her voice calling my name when I was alone. Lily said she saw her in her dreams, standing at the end of her bed. A week later, Jason told us his grandmother used to work at that hospital. She said there was a fire many years ago. Some patients and nurses died because they couldn't escape. People said their spirits never left. Maybe the woman we saw was one of them. We tried to forget what happened, but the memories stayed. Sometimes when I walk past the empty lot where the hospital used to be, I feel a cold wind and hear a soft humming. I wonder if the woman is still waiting for someone to help her. Even now, years later, I still dream about that night. In my dreams, I am back in the hospital, lost in the endless hallways. The woman is always there, watching from the shadows. I wake up cold and afraid, and I can still hear her whisper my name. My aunt's house in Penang was always a little strange. It was an old wooden house built before the war with creaky floors and high ceilings. The windows were big but always seemed a bit dirty, no matter how much you cleaned them. My parents sent me there every school holiday, saying it was good for me to get away from the city. My aunt was kind, but she followed old traditions. She left rice and tea on the altar every morning. She burned incense and whispered prayers in Hokkien. She told me not to whistle at night and never to look into mirrors after midnight. I didn't believe in ghosts, but the house felt different at night. The wind made the trees outside scratch the windows. The old wooden walls made strange sounds. Sometimes I heard footsteps in the hallway, even though my aunt was already asleep. She said it was just the house settling, but I wasn't so sure. One night during the Hungry Ghost Festival, my aunt told me to come home before dark. She said the gates between worlds were open, and we shouldn't wander outside. That evening, I tried to sleep early, but the air felt heavy. I heard people burning, paper money in the distance. The smell drifted in through the open window. I closed my eyes, but I kept hearing soft voices outside like people talking in the garden. I pulled the blanket over my head and tried to ignore it. Then I heard a knock at my door. I thought it was my aunt, but when I opened the door, the hallway was empty. The house was quiet. I went back to bed, but the knocking started again, this time from the window. I sat up, heart pounding. I looked, but saw nothing except the dark garden. I told myself it was just a tree branch. But then I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow and dragging. I called out for my aunt, but she didn't answer. I peeked out and saw a shadow moving past the kitchen. It was too tall to be my aunt. I hid under my blanket, trying not to make a sound. After a long time, I heard whispering outside my door. It sounded like someone calling my name, but the voice was thin and strange. I stayed as quiet as I could. The voice faded, and I finally fell asleep. The next morning, I told my aunt what happened. She looked worried and said I should have listened to her. She gave me a small red pouch and told me to keep it with me at all times. She said it would keep the restless spirits away. That night I tried to keep the pouch close, but just after midnight, I woke up to the sound of someone crying. It was soft at first, then louder. I sat up and listened. The crying was coming from the old storeroom at the end of the hall. My aunt's room was on the other side of the house, so I knew it couldn't be her. I thought about staying in bed, but the crying sounded so sad. I took my flashlight and tiptoed down the hallway. The house was cold and the floor creaked under my feet. The crying stopped as I reached the storeroom door. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The room was dark, full of old boxes and broken furniture. The air smelled dusty. I shone my light around and saw something move in the corner. It was a girl, maybe a little older than me, dressed in an old-fashioned white dress. Her hair was long and covered her face. She was hugging her knees and rocking back and forth. I asked her who she was, but she didn't answer. She just kept crying. I felt sorry for her, but also afraid. I remembered my aunt's warning about spirits. I stepped back, but the girl looked up. Her eyes were dark and empty. She reached out her hand and whispered, "Help me." I ran back to my room and locked the door. I pressed the red pouch to my chest and tried to calm down. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next day, I told my aunt everything. She seemed scared. She said the house had a history. Before the war, a girl who lived there got sick and died in that storeroom. Her family moved away, but some people said her spirit never left. My aunt said the Hungry Ghost Festival made spirits stronger, and I had seen something I shouldn't have. She burned more incense and stuck yellow paper charms on my door. She told me not to go near the storeroom again. I listened, but every night I heard footsteps and soft crying. Sometimes I saw the shadow of the girl in the hallway, just standing and watching me. One evening, my aunt had to go out to help a neighbor. She told me to lock the doors and not answer if anyone knocked. I sat in the living room watching TV, trying to ignore the strange feeling in the house. Suddenly, the TV flickered and turned off. The lights dimmed. I heard footsteps upstairs. I wanted to call my aunt, but my phone had no signal. The footsteps came down the stairs, slow and heavy. I hid behind the sofa, holding the red pouch tight. The crying started again, closer this time. The girl's shadow moved across the wall. She stopped in front of the living room. I could see her pale feet under the door. She whispered, "Help me, please." Her voice was so sad I almost wanted to open the door, but I remembered my aunt's warning. I closed my eyes and prayed, just like she taught me. The crying faded. When I opened my eyes, the house was quiet again. The lights came back. I waited for my aunt to return. When she did, I hugged her and told her everything. After that, my aunt called a monk to bless the house. He walked through every room chanting and sprinkling holy water. He said the girl's spirit was lost and needed to move on. He left more charms and told us to keep the altar clean and offer prayers every day. Things got better after that. The footsteps stopped. The crying faded away. But sometimes late at night I still feel a cold breeze in the hallway. Sometimes I think I see a shadow at the end of the corridor, waiting. When the holidays ended, I went back to the city. My aunt still lives in that old house. She keeps the altar fresh with rice and tea. She never lets the red pouch leave my side when I visit. She says some spirits never really leave, and it's best to show respect. Now, whenever I hear the wind at night or see shadows in old houses, I remember the girl in white. I wonder if she ever found peace, or if she's still waiting for someone to help her. Last summer, my cousin Yuki came to visit me in my small town in Japan. We were both bored and looking for something exciting to do. One afternoon, Yuki told me about an abandoned school building near the edge of town. The school closed many years ago, and people said it was haunted. Some kids at my school said they saw strange lights there at night. Others said they heard voices or saw shadows moving in the windows. I didn't really believe in ghosts, but I was curious. Yuki and I decided to go and see the place for ourselves. We waited until after sunset when the streets were quiet. We brought a flashlight and our phones. The school was hidden behind tall grass and old cherry trees. The building was covered in vines, and the windows were dirty and broken. There was a rusty gate, but it was unlocked. We pushed it open and walked inside. The hallway was dark and smelled like mold. Our footsteps echoed as we walked. The walls had old posters and faded pictures of students. Some doors were open, but most were closed. We tried to be brave, but I felt nervous. I kept looking over my shoulder even though I knew no one was behind us. We decided to explore the classrooms first. The desks and chairs were still there, but everything was dusty. Some desks had names carved into them. I found a notebook on the floor. The pages were yellow, and the writing was hard to read. I showed it to Yuki, and we tried to make out the words. It looked like a diary from a student who went to the school long ago. The last page just said, "Help me," over and over. Yuki laughed and said someone was just trying to scare people. I agreed, but I felt a little uneasy. We moved to the next classroom. The air was colder there. I heard a faint sound, like someone whispering. I thought it was just the wind, but Yuki heard it too. She grabbed my arm and we stood very still. The whispering stopped. We kept exploring. In the music room, the piano was missing some keys. Yuki pressed one and it made a strange broken sound. Suddenly we heard footsteps above us on the second floor. We froze. There was no one else supposed to be here. We looked at each other and listened. The footsteps were slow, like someone dragging their feet. We decided to go upstairs. The staircase creaked under our weight. At the top, the hallway was even darker. The doors to the classrooms were half open. We walked quietly, trying not to make any noise. I felt like someone was watching us. We reached the science lab. The door was closed. Yuki pushed it open, and it made a loud squeak. Inside, the room was filled with old bottles and broken equipment. There was a strange smell like chemicals. On the blackboard, someone had drawn a face with big, empty eyes. Yuki took a picture with her phone. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind us. We both jumped and tried to open it, but it wouldn't move. The room got colder. I saw my breath in the air. The lights flickered even though there was no power in the building. Then we heard a soft crying sound coming from the corner of the room. We shined our flashlight in the corner. There was nothing there, just an old coat and a pile of books, but the crying got louder. I felt a sharp pain in my head, like someone was whispering right into my ear. Yuki started to cry. She said she wanted to leave. We banged on the door, and finally, it opened by itself. We ran out into the hallway. I felt dizzy, and my hands were shaking. Yuki said she saw a shadow behind me, but when I turned around, there was nothing. We hurried down the stairs and tried to leave the building, but the front door was closed. We pulled and pushed, but it was stuck. We heard footsteps again, coming closer. This time it sounded like more than one person. We hid in a classroom and waited. The footsteps stopped outside the door. We held our breath. The doorknob turned, slowly, but the door didn't open. I could hear someone breathing on the other side. Suddenly, the window behind us rattled. We turned and saw a pale face looking in. The eyes were dark and empty, just like the face on the blackboard. The face disappeared, and we heard the sound of children laughing echoing down the hallway. We ran out of the classroom and tried the back exit. The door opened, and we ran outside into the night. We didn't stop running until we reached the street. We looked back and saw lights flickering in the windows of the old school. I heard the sound of a piano playing even though no one was inside. After that night, Yuki and I promised never to go back. Sometimes I dream about the school. I see the face with the empty eyes, and I hear the crying and the laughter. I wake, up with my heart pounding. Some people say the spirits of the students who went missing long ago are still trapped in the building. Others say it's just stories to scare kids like us. But I know what I saw and heard. When I walk by the old school, I feel cold even on hot days. I don't look at the windows. I don't want to see that face again. A few weeks later, Yuki went home. She called me and said she still heard whispering at night. She said she sometimes Saw shadows moving in her room. I told her to hang a charm by her bed like my grandmother taught me. She said it helped a little, but she still had bad dreams. I started leaving small offerings by the old school gate: rice, salt, and water. My grandmother said it would help calm the spirits. I hope it works. I just want things to go back to normal. Now, whenever I hear about someone wanting to explore the abandoned school, I tell them not to go. Some people laugh, but I can see fear in their eyes. Maybe they believe me, or maybe they just don't want to take the risk. Even now, when the wind blows through the cherry trees, I think I hear children laughing and crying. The school is still there, waiting, with its empty halls and broken windows. I hope the spirits find peace someday. Until then, I stay away. My friends and I always like to explore strange places. In our town in Japan, there was an old abandoned hospital on the edge of the city. People said it was haunted, but nobody really believed the stories. We just thought it would be fun to go inside and take some photos. One night, we decided to sneak in after dark. There were 4 of us: me, my best friend Kenji, and 2 girls from our school, Aya and Mickey. We met near the gates just before midnight. The hospital looked even scarier. At night, the windows were broken and weeds grew everywhere. The front door was locked, but Kenji found a broken window at the side. We climbed in one by one. Inside, the air was cold and smelled like dust and old medicine. Our flashlights made long shadows on the walls. We walked down a dark hallway. The paint was peeling and there were old beds and chairs left behind. Sometimes we heard strange noises like something moving far away. We laughed and tried to act brave, but I could feel my heart beating fast. We took pictures and joked about ghosts. Aya said she wanted to find the old operating room. Kenji agreed, so we started looking for it. The hospital was bigger than I thought. We found stairs and went up to the 2nd floor. There were more empty rooms, some with broken glass on the floor. We saw old posters with faded writing. One showed a nurse smiling, but her eyes looked strange in the flashlight. Mickey said she felt cold. I tried to tell her it was just the wind, but I felt it too. At the end of the hallway, we found a door with a sign that said surgery. Kenji pushed it open. The room was large, with an old metal table in the middle. There were rusty tools on a tray and a broken light hanging from the ceiling. Suddenly, our flashlights flickered. The room got even colder. Aya stepped closer to the table. She pointed to a dark stain on the floor. "Is that blood?" she whispered. Kenji said it was probably just old paint, but none of us wanted to touch it. Then we heard a noise behind us, like someone walking in the hallway. We froze and listened. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Kenji called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" No answer. He walked to the door and looked into the hallway. It was empty. When he turned back, his face looked pale. "Let's go," he said. We left the operating room and walked quickly down the stairs. The building seemed darker than before. As we passed the nurse's station, I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. It looked like a white shape, like a person in an old hospital gown. I grabbed Kenji's arm. "Did you see that?" I asked. He shook his head, but I could tell he was scared. We hurried down the hall, but the way out felt longer this time. Every shadow looked like it was moving. Mickey started crying. Aya tried to calm her, but her voice was shaking too. We finally reached the window where we came in. Kenji helped the girls climb out first. When it was my turn, I felt someone watching me from the darkness. I looked back and saw a face in the shadows. It was pale and thin, with dark eyes that stared right at me. The mouth was open, but there was no sound. I couldn't move. Kenji pulled me out of the window just as my legs started to shake. We ran all the way to the street. We stopped under a streetlight, breathing hard. The hospital stood behind us, silent and dark. Nobody said anything for a long time. Finally, Aya asked if we had all seen the same thing. Kenji nodded. Mickey just cried harder. After that night, things changed. Mickey stopped coming to school. Her parents said she was sick, but nobody knew what was wrong. Aya had nightmares and wouldn't talk about the hospital. Kenji and I tried to forget, but sometimes I saw that pale face when I closed my eyes. One day I found a strange mark on my arm. It looked like a bruise, but in the shape of a hand. I hid it under my sleeve. At night, I heard footsteps outside my room. I told myself it was just my imagination, but I never slept well after that. A week later, Kenji called me. He sounded scared. He said he saw someone standing outside his house, wearing a white gown. He tried to take a picture, but the figure was gone when he looked again. I told him to come over, but he said he was too tired. The next day, he didn't come to school. I went to his house, but his mother said he was sleeping. She looked worried. That night, I dreamed about the hospital. I was back in the operating room. The pale face was there, closer this time. It reached out and touched my hand. I woke up sweating, my heart racing. The next morning, I heard that Kenji was in the hospital. He wouldn't wake up. The doctor said he was healthy, but he just wouldn't open his eyes. Aya and I visited him. She held his hand and cried. I saw the same bruise on his wrist, shaped like a hand. After that, I started to feel weaker every day. I didn't want to eat. I heard whispers at night, voices calling my name. My parents took me to a shrine. The priest said we had disturbed something in the hospital. He gave me a charm and told me to pray every day. I still dream about the hospital. Sometimes I see Kenji and Mickey there, lost in the dark hallways. The pale face is always waiting, watching us. I wish we had never gone inside. Now when I see an old building, I stay far away. Some places are better left alone, but sometimes late at night I hear footsteps in the hallway. I see a pale hand reach for me in the dark. I close my eyes and hope it goes away. I keep the charm close, but I don't think it helps anymore. The hospital is still there, waiting for the next person to come inside. My friends and I used to talk about the old school building at the edge of our town in South Korea. It was empty, with broken windows and a rusty gate. The walls were covered in faded paint and strange marks. People said it was haunted. They said a girl once disappeared there and her ghost still waited inside. One evening, my friend Minho dared us to go inside. He laughed and said we were all scared. I didn't want to look weak, so I agreed. 4 of us went. Minho, Jisoo, Hana, and me. We waited until it was almost dark. The air felt heavy as we got close. The gate creaked when we pushed it open. We stepped inside the yard, and weeds brushed against our legs. The front door was stuck, but Minho forced it open. The hallway was dark and smelled like old paper and dust. Our footsteps echoed. We used our phones for light. The floor creaked under us. I saw old shoes in the corner, covered in dirt. There were broken desks and chairs everywhere. A blackboard still had some chalk writing, but the words were faded. We walked down the hall trying to be quiet. Hana whispered that she heard something moving. Jisoo said it was just a rat, but I felt like someone was watching us. We reached the stairs. Minho wanted to go up. I didn't, but I followed. The stairs groaned with every step. On the second floor, the air was even colder. We passed a classroom with a door half open. Inside, the desks were in a circle. There was a doll sitting in the middle. It had no eyes. Hana gasped and grabbed my arm. Minho laughed, but his voice sounded shaky. Jisoo took a picture, but her phone shut off right after. She tried to turn it on, but it stayed black. Then we heard a noise from down the hall. It was soft, like someone crying. Minho said it was probably the wind, but we all knew it wasn't windy that night. We walked toward the sound. The hallway seemed longer than before. The crying got louder. It sounded like a girl. We stopped at the last door. It was closed. Minho reached for the handle, but it was ice cold. He pulled his hand back and looked at us. Hana started to cry and said she wanted to go home. I wanted to leave too, but Minho said we had to finish the dare. He pushed the door open. The room was dark, but we saw a shape in the corner. It was a girl, wearing a white dress. Her hair covered her face. She was rocking back and forth. The crying stopped. The room felt freezing. I couldn't move. Minho tried to talk to her, but she didn't answer. He stepped closer. Suddenly, she lifted her head. Her eyes were empty, just black holes. Her mouth opened wide and a cold wind rushed out. The door slammed shut behind us. Jisoo screamed. Hana fell to the floor. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't work. The girl stood up and floated toward us. Her feet didn't touch the ground. She pointed at Minho. He started to shake. His eyes rolled back, and he fell. The girl turned to Jisoo, then Hana, then me. I felt her cold breath on my face. My vision went dark. When I woke up, I was outside the school building. The sun was rising. My friends were next to me, but Minho wouldn't wake up. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. We called for help, and soon people came. They took Minho to the hospital, but he never spoke again. Later, I learned that the girl who disappeared all those years ago was named Unji. She was bullied and locked in that room by other students. No one found her until it was too late. People say her spirit is still looking for someone to help her. Or maybe she just wants to make others feel her pain. Now, every time I walk past the old school, I hear crying. Sometimes I see a shadow in the window. I never go near that place anymore. I still dream about that night. In my dreams, the girl's face is right in front of mine, and she whispers my name. I wake up cold and scared, and I hear crying in the distance. After that night, Jisoo moved away. Hana stopped talking to anyone. I tried to forget, but I never could. Sometimes I get messages on my phone with no name. They just say, "Come back." I delete them, but they always return. The crying never stops. One day, I saw a little girl standing outside the old school gate. She looked lost. I wanted to help. But when I got closer, she smiled at me. Her eyes were black and her mouth stretched too wide. I ran home and locked my door. I told my parents everything, but they just said it was a bad dream. But I know what I saw. I know what happened. Some nights I wake up and see someone standing at the end of my bed. She has long hair and a white dress. She doesn't move. She just watches me. I try to tell myself it's not real, but I can't sleep with the lights off anymore. I hear footsteps in the hallway at night. My phone rings, but when I answer, I only hear crying. I wish we never went into that building. I wish we listened to the stories. Now, I warn everyone to stay away from the old school. But sometimes I see kids sneaking in at dusk, laughing and daring each other. I want to stop them, but I know they won't listen. I just hope they don't meet her like we did. I hope they get out before it's too late. The rain drummed on the roof of the old hotel in Kyoto, Japan. I had come to this city to see the cherry blossoms, but the weather had turned gloomy. I checked into a small room that smelled of wood and dampness. The hotel was quiet, almost too quiet. It felt like I was the only guest. After settling in, I decided to explore the area. I stepped outside, and the rain had lessened to a light drizzle. The streets were empty, and the soft glow of the lanterns reflected off the wet pavement. I wandered down a narrow alley, where the scent of grilled fish wafted through the air. My stomach grumbled, but I wanted to see more of the city first. As I walked, I stumbled upon an old temple. The entrance was adorned with faded banners, and the stone path was lined with moss. I felt a strange pull to enter. Pushing the heavy, wooden door open, I stepped inside. The air was cool and still. Dust motes floated in the beams of light that streamed through the cracks in the walls. Inside, the temple was empty. The wooden floors creaked under my feet. I walked deeper into the building, drawn by an unseen force. The walls were covered in beautiful paintings of gods and spirits. I felt a sense of peace wash over me, but also an unsettling feeling like I was being watched. As I approached the main altar, I noticed a small statue of a woman. She looked sad, her eyes cast downward. I felt a connection to her. Suddenly, I heard a soft whisper, "Help me." It was faint, almost like the wind. I looked around, but no one was there. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. No answer came. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the feeling of unease. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me. Panic surged through me. I rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge. "Let me out," I shouted, fear gripping my heart. The whisper returned, now louder. "Help me." It seemed to come from the statue. I turned back, my heart racing. The statue's eyes seemed to glow in the dim light. I stepped closer, feeling drawn to it. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice trembling. "How can I help you?" "Find my flower," the voice whispered, echoing in my mind. "It is lost." I looked around, desperate to understand. "Where is it?" I asked. "By the river," she replied softly. "You must hurry." I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. I had to help her. I turned to the door again, and to my surprise, it creaked open. I rushed out into the rain, the cold droplets hitting my face. I ran toward the river, my heart pounding. The river was not far from the temple. As I approached, I saw the water glistening under the moonlight. I scanned the banks for any sign of a flower. The sound of the water was calming, but the darkness around me felt heavy. Then I spotted a patch of bright flowers growing near the water's edge. I knelt down, carefully picking one. As I held the flower in my hand, I felt a chill run through me. The air grew colder and I shivered. I looked around, feeling like something was watching me. I turned and hurried back to the temple, clutching the flower tightly. When I entered, the atmosphere felt different. The air was thick, almost electric. I approached the statue again, holding out the flower. "I found it," I exclaimed. The statue's eyes seemed to brighten. "Thank you," the voice said, softer now. "You have saved me." Suddenly, the room shook. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting and turning. I stumbled back, feeling dizzy. The air felt alive, swirling around me. The statue began to glow, and a figure emerged from it, a woman, ethereal and beautiful. "Thank you for freeing me," she said, her voice like music. "I was trapped for so long." She reached out her hand and I felt warmth spread through me. "Who are you?" I asked, awed by her presence. "I am the spirit of this temple," she replied. "Long ago I was cursed. You have broken the curse with your kindness." I felt a sense of relief wash over me. "What will happen now?" I asked. "I can finally go home," she said, smiling gently. "But you must promise to tell my story. Do not let anyone forget me." "I promise," I said, feeling the weight of her words. The shadows around us began to fade and the room brightened. The lanterns glowed warmly, illuminating the space. "Thank you," she said again, her form shimmering. "You have done well." With that, she began to dissolve into light, leaving a warm glow in the air. I stood there, stunned, as the last remnants of her presence faded away. The temple felt peaceful now, no longer heavy with sadness. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter. I walked out of the temple, the rain having stopped. The streets were quiet, but I felt a sense of calm as I made my way back to the hotel. I couldn't shake the feeling of connection I had with the spirit. I knew I would carry her story with me. I would tell others about the kind spirit of the temple and the flower that saved her. When I reached my room, I felt grateful. I had come to see the cherry blossoms, but I had found something much deeper. I had discovered a story of hope and redemption in a place that once felt dark and lonely. My name is Yuki, and I grew up in a small town in Japan. Our school was old, with wooden floors that creaked and long, dark hallways. The building had been there for generations. Some people said it was haunted, but I never really believed it. That changed last spring, when my friends and I decided to explore the old school building after everyone had gone home. It was raining that day. The sky was gray, and the air felt heavy. My friends, Sora and Mika, waited for me by the back gate. We all wore our uniforms, even though school was over. We slipped inside through a side door. The hallways were quiet and our footsteps echoed. We started on the first floor. The classrooms were empty. Desks and chairs were stacked in the corners. I could smell old chalk and dust. Sora joked about ghosts, but Mika told him to stop. She said her grandmother once saw a woman in white near the music room. We laughed, but I felt nervous. We went up to the second floor. The air felt colder there. The windows were foggy and I could see drops of rain sliding down the glass. We passed the science lab, then the art room. Everything looked normal, but it was too quiet. I started to wish we hadn't come. At the end of the hall was the old music room. The door was closed, but I could hear something inside. It sounded like a piano. Sora grinned and pushed the door open. The room was dark except for a little light from the window. There was a piano in the corner, and the keys were moving by themselves. Mika gasped. Sora froze. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The music stopped. The room felt colder. I heard a soft voice whisper my name. I turned around, but no one was there. Sora said, "Let's get out of here." We backed out of the room and closed the door. The hallway seemed darker now. I felt like someone was watching us. We hurried down the stairs, but when we reached the first floor, the door we came in through was locked. We tried the other doors, but they wouldn't open. The rain outside got heavier. It was getting dark. Mika started to cry. Sora tried to calm her down. I told them we should find a teacher's office and call for help. We walked down another hallway, past the gym and the library. The lights flickered above us. We found the principal's office. The door was open, but the room was empty. There was a phone on the desk. I picked it up, but there was no dial tone. The office smelled strange, like old flowers and something rotten. Suddenly, the lights went out. We stood in the dark, holding hands. I heard footsteps in the hallway. They were slow and heavy. Sora whispered, "Who's there?" No one answered. The footsteps got closer. I could see a shadow in the doorway. It looked like a woman in an old-fashioned dress. Her hair was long and covered her face. She didn't move, just stood there. Mika screamed. The woman started to walk toward us. Sora grabbed my arm and we ran out of the office. We didn't look back. We ran down the hall and up the stairs looking for another way out. On the third floor, we found a storage room. We hid inside and locked the door. The room was full of old books, broken chairs, and boxes. We sat in the dark, trying not to make a sound. I heard someone whispering outside the door. It was the same soft voice from the music room. It called my name again and again. I covered my ears, but I could still hear it. Sora said we should wait until morning. Mika was shaking. I tried to be brave, but I was so scared. The whispering stopped, but I heard footsteps moving away. After a while, I fell asleep. When I woke up, it was still dark. Sora and Mika were asleep too. I heard the piano again playing a slow, sad song. I wanted to go home. We waited for what felt like hours. Finally, the sun started to rise. Light came through the window. The school felt quiet again. We left the storage room and went downstairs. The doors were open now. We ran outside and didn't stop until we reached the main road. We promised not to talk about what happened, but I still think about that night. Sometimes I hear the piano when I walk by the old school building. I wonder if the woman in white is still there, waiting for someone to listen to her song. After that day, I tried to forget what happened. But strange things kept happening. One night I heard someone playing the piano in my house. I went to the living room, but no one was there. The keys were cold when I touched them. I started to have dreams about the old school. In my dreams, the hallways were always dark. I could hear footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, no one was there. Sometimes I saw the woman in white standing at the end of the hall. She never spoke, but she always looked so sad. I told my mother about the dreams. She said I was just stressed from school, but I knew it was more than that. I stopped going near the old building. I even changed my route to school so I wouldn't have to see it. One day Sora told me he saw the woman in his backyard. She was standing under a tree looking at his window. He said he couldn't sleep for days after that. Mika said she heard someone calling her name at night. We all felt like the woman was following us. We decided to go back to the school one last time. We wanted to find out who the woman was and why she was haunting us. We brought flowers and incense, hoping it would help. We went to the music room. The piano was still there. We placed the flowers on top and lit the incense. I said, "We're sorry for disturbing you. Please let us go." The room felt warmer. I heard a soft sigh, and the keys on the piano moved by themselves, playing a gentle tune. The woman appeared in the corner. She smiled at us, and for the first time her face was clear. She looked young and kind. She bowed her head, then faded, away. The music stopped. The room felt empty but peaceful. After that, the dream stopped. We didn't see the woman again. The old school building was torn down a few months later. A new one was built in its place. But sometimes, when I hear a piano, I remember the woman in white and her sad song. My cousin Lek always liked to dare people. One night he said, "Let's go to the old hospital." Everyone in our small Thai town knew about that place. It was left empty for years. People said it was haunted. Some said they heard crying at night. Others saw shadows in the windows. I did not want to go, but Lek laughed at me. "You're scared of ghosts?" he teased. My friends all looked at me. I did not want to be called a coward, so I agreed. We met at the hospital gate just after sunset. The sky was orange and pink, but the hospital looked dark and cold. The fence was broken. Lek climbed over first. I followed, my heart beating fast. The others came too, but they kept quiet. The hospital was big, with 3 floors and broken windows. Vines covered the walls. The front doors were open. We stepped inside. The air smelled old and wet. It was quiet, except for the sound of our shoes on the dirty floor. We used our phones for light. The halls were long and empty, paint peeled off the walls. There were old beds and rusty chairs in the corners. Lek joked, "Maybe we'll see a ghost nurse." Nobody laughed. We reached the main lobby. There was an old desk and a broken clock on the wall. I checked my phone. It was only 11:30, but it felt much later. Lek said, "Let's go to the 3rd floor. That's where the operating rooms are." I wanted to say no, but Lek was already going up the stairs. The stairs creaked under our feet. On the 2nd floor, we heard a noise. It sounded like a door closing. We stopped and looked at each other. Lek whispered, "It's just the wind." We kept going. The 3rd floor was darker. The windows were broken and the wind made strange sounds. We walked down the hall passing empty rooms. I saw an old wheelchair in one room. It moved a little, even though nobody touched it. Lek pushed open the door to the biggest room. It was the old operating room. The metal table was still there, covered in dust. There were old tools on a tray. I felt cold. My friend Nock said, "Let's go back." But Lek wanted to take a photo. He stood by the table and held up his phone. The rest of us waited by the door. Suddenly the lights flickered. We all froze. There was no power, but the lights flashed for a second. Then we heard footsteps in the hall. Slow, heavy steps. They came closer. I felt my skin crawl. Lek tried to laugh, but his voice shook. "Who's there?" he called. "No," one answered. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Then we heard breathing. It was slow and deep. I wanted to run, but my legs would not move. The door creaked open a little more. A dark shape stood in the doorway. It looked like a nurse in an old uniform, but her face was pale and her eyes were black. She stared at us. Lek dropped his phone. It hit the floor and the light went out. The room was dark. I heard Nock whisper, "We need to go." I grabbed Lek's arm. The nurse stepped into the room. She moved slowly, her feet not making a sound. Her mouth opened wide, but she did not speak. I saw blood on her dress. We ran. I do not remember how we got out of the room. I just remember running down the hall, down the stairs, and out the front doors. We did not stop until we reached the gate. I looked back. The hospital was dark and silent again. We never talked about that night. Lek stopped making dares. Sometimes I dream about that nurse. In my dreams, she stands at the end of my bed, her mouth open, her eyes black. I wake up sweating. My mother says the hospital was closed after a fire. Many people died and some bodies were never found. She says their spirits still wander the halls, looking for peace. A few weeks later, I saw something strange. I was walking past the hospital with my mother. A window on the 3rd floor was open. I saw a white shape move inside. I stopped and stared. My mother pulled me away. "Don't look," she said. "It's not good to see the dead." I tried to forget, but sometimes at night I hear footsteps outside my window. I hear slow, deep breathing. I close my eyes and hope it will go away. My friends say the nurse is still there, waiting for someone to help her. They say if you hear her crying, you must not answer. If you do, she will follow you home. One night I woke up and heard crying outside. It was soft, almost like a child. I remembered what my friends said, so I stayed quiet. The crying stopped after a while. In the morning, I saw wet footprints outside my window. They led toward the old hospital. Now I never go near that place. Even in the day, it feels cold and empty. People say the spirits there wait for someone to remember them. Maybe they are lonely. Maybe they are angry. I do not know. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know I will never go back. But sometimes I wonder about that nurse. Was she asking for help? Was she angry? Or was she just lost, like me? I hope she finds peace someday. Until then, I stay away from the old hospital. And when I hear footsteps at night, I pull my blanket over my head and pray for morning. The night air in Kyoto always feels a little heavy. I had just finished my part-time shift at a small restaurant near the old town. My bike was waiting for me outside, but the shortcut home passed by a temple. It was late, almost midnight, but I was tired and wanted to get home fast, so I took the shortcut. The path was narrow and lined with ancient stone lanterns. Their shapes looked strange in the weak moonlight. The temple itself was old, with wooden gates and a roof covered in moss. I had always felt a bit uneasy passing by it, especially at night, but nothing ever happened. Tonight, though, something felt different. There was a chill in the air, and the wind sounded like whispers. As I walked my bike past the temple gate, I noticed the gate was slightly open. That was unusual. The temple usually closed at sunset. I stopped for a second, thinking maybe someone forgot to lock it. Then I heard a soft bell ring from inside the temple grounds. The sound was clear and gentle, but it made my skin crawl. I looked around, thinking maybe it was just the wind, but the bell rang again, a little louder. Curiosity got the better of me. I leaned my bike against the wall and stepped through the gate. The stone path inside was cracked and uneven. The main hall of the temple stood in the shadows, its doors closed. But there was a faint light coming from the side building, the one where the priests used to live. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" No answer. The bell rang again, this time from the side building. I walked toward the light. My footsteps echoed on the stones. The air smelled old, like incense and dust. As I got closer, I saw the sliding door was half open. Light spilled out onto the porch. I hesitated, then peeked inside. An old woman sat on the floor facing away from me. She wore a white kimono, and her gray hair was tied up. In front of her was a small table with a bell and some candles. She was ringing the bell with slow, careful movements. I felt like I should leave, but I couldn't move. The woman turned her head and looked at me. Her eyes were dark and her face was pale, almost gray. She smiled, but it didn't feel friendly. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice thin and cold. I tried to apologize, but my mouth was dry. She stood up, still holding the bell. She moved toward me, her steps silent. I backed away, but my feet felt heavy. Suddenly the candles went out. The room turned pitch black. I heard the bell ring louder and faster. I turned to run, but the sliding door slammed shut in front of me. I pushed at it, but it wouldn't budge. Behind me, I heard the woman whispering. The words were too soft to understand, but they sounded angry. Something cold brushed against my neck. I spun around, but I couldn't see anything. The bell kept ringing, echoing in my ears. I felt hands grabbing my arms, pulling me back. I screamed, but my voice sounded small. The darkness pressed in on me. The whispering grew louder, filling my head. Then suddenly, everything stopped. The door slid open by itself. I stumbled outside, gasping for air. The temple grounds were empty. The old woman was gone. My bike was still leaning against the wall. I grabbed it and rode away as fast as I could. When I got home, I locked the door and turned on every light. My heart wouldn't stop racing. I tried to tell myself it was just a dream, that I was tired and my mind was playing tricks on me. But the next morning, I found a small bell in my backpack. It was the same bell the woman had used. I didn't go near that temple again. But sometimes, late at night, I hear a bell ringing in the distance. It sounds like it's calling my name. A week later, my friend Yuki told me her grandmother used to visit that temple. She said the priest left years ago after strange things started happening. People heard voices at night and some saw shadows moving behind the windows. One man disappeared after going in to pray for his sick wife. They found his shoes at the gate, but nothing else. Yuki warned me to stay away. She said the temple was cursed and the spirits there didn't like strangers. I tried to forget about it, but the bell kept showing up. I threw it away, but the next day it was on my pillow. I smashed it with a hammer, but at night, I heard it ring under my bed. I started having nightmares. In my dreams, I was trapped inside the temple. The old woman was there and her face was changing, melting, turning into something dark and hollow. She would reach out and touch my face with cold fingers. Every time I woke up, I felt like someone was watching me. One night I woke up and saw a shadow standing at the foot of my bed. It was tall and thin with long hair covering its face. I froze, unable to move. The shadow whispered, "Come back." The bell rang softly. I closed my eyes and prayed for morning. After that, I moved to a different part of the city. I changed my phone number and told no one where I went. But the nightmares followed me. Sometimes I see the old woman in crowds, just for a second. Sometimes I hear the bell on quiet nights. No matter how far I go, I can't escape it. I tried to talk to a priest about it. He listened quietly, then gave me a charm to wear. He said it might help, but I'm not sure it will. The bell still rings in my dreams. The old woman still waits for me in the dark. Now, when I walk alone at night, I avoid temples. I never take shortcuts, no matter how tired I am. I know something is waiting for me just beyond the edge of the light. And I know one night I'll hear the bell again, closer than before. I don't know what will happen then. I just hope I never find out. When I was a teenager, my mother got sick and had to stay in a hospital in Chiang Mai. The hospital was big but old. The walls were yellow and the lights buzzed at night. My mother's room was on the 3rd floor at the end of a long hallway. I visited her every evening after school. Most days the nurses smiled and the halls were busy, but at night everything felt different. One evening I came late because of rain. The halls were quiet. I walked past empty chairs and closed doors. The air smelled like medicine and something sweet, but also a little rotten. I heard my shoes squeak on the floor. I hated that sound. When I reached my mother's room, she was sleeping. The nurse said she had a fever and needed rest. I sat by her bed and held her hand. Her skin was warm and damp. I whispered to her, hoping she could hear me. The room was small and the window looked out onto a dark garden. I felt lonely. After a while, I decided to get some water. The water machine was at the other end of the hall. As I walked, I saw a woman in a white hospital gown standing by the window. Her hair was long and messy. She didn't move or look at me. I thought maybe she was a patient who couldn't sleep. I nodded to her, but she didn't react. I felt a chill and hurried past. When I filled my cup, I heard a soft humming sound. It was a song, almost like a lullaby. I looked around, but no, one was there. I walked back and the woman was gone. I tried to forget about her, but I couldn't. That night, I slept in a chair by my mother's bed. I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. They were slow and heavy. I peeked outside. The lights flickered. I saw the same woman walking away from me. Her gown was stained and her feet were bare. She turned a corner and disappeared. I asked a nurse about her in the morning. The nurse looked nervous and told me not to worry. She said sometimes patients wander at night, but I saw fear in her eyes. The next night, my mother's fever got worse. She talked in her sleep and squeezed my hand. I felt scared. The humming started again, louder this time. It came from the hallway. I opened the door and saw the woman standing under the light. Her face was pale, and her eyes were dark and empty. She stared at me. I couldn't move. She raised her hand and pointed at my mother. Then she vanished. I rushed back into the room and closed the door. My mother was shivering and mumbling. I called for help. The nurses came and gave her medicine. They told me to rest. I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the humming and the footsteps. I started to think the woman was a ghost. In Thailand, people believe that spirits stay in hospitals, especially if someone dies with unfinished business. I wondered if she wanted something from us. The next day, my mother felt better. She smiled and said she dreamed of a lady in white, singing to her. I felt cold all over. I told her not to listen if she heard the song again. I tried to stay awake that night. Around midnight, I saw the woman again. She stood at the foot of my mother's bed and sang her strange song. I shouted for her to go away. She looked at me, her mouth twisted into a sad smile. Tears ran down her cheeks. She reached out to touch my mother, but I grabbed her hand. It was cold as ice. Suddenly, I saw flashes of her memories. She was a patient here many years ago. She was lonely and scared. No one visited her. She died alone, waiting for someone to come. Her sadness was heavy, and it filled the room. I let go of her hand. She looked at me with pleading eyes. I said, "You are not alone anymore. You can rest now." She nodded and slowly faded away. In the morning, my mother woke up feeling much better. The nurses said her fever was gone. I never saw the woman again, but sometimes I hear her song in my dreams. I think she finally found peace. A few weeks later, my mother left the hospital. On our way out, I looked back at the third-floor window. For a moment, I thought I saw the woman's face smiling at me. Then she was gone. I still remember the hospital smell, the cold touch, and the sad song. Sometimes, when I walk past a hospital at night, I feel a chill and wonder if other spirits are still waiting. I hope someone will help them find peace, too. Life went back to normal, but I often thought about the ghost. I asked my grandmother about spirits in hospitals. She told me stories about lost souls and how to help them move on. She said I was brave to talk to the woman. She gave me a small charm to carry, just in case. One day, I visited the hospital again to say thank you to the nurses. I walked past the same hallway. It felt less scary now. The lights were bright, and the air smelled clean. I left flowers by the window where I first saw the woman. I whispered, "Thank you for watching over my mother." At home, I sometimes dream of the hospital. In my dreams, the woman is smiling and waving goodbye. I wake up feeling calm. I know she is at peace. The night market in Chiang Mai is always crowded. People laugh, eat, and buy things under bright lights. I liked going there with my friends. It felt safe, even when the sky was dark. But one night, I learned that not everything in the market is meant for people like us. It started when I saw a small stall in a dark corner. The lights were dim and no one else seemed to notice it. My friends were busy buying snacks, so I walked over to the stall alone. An old woman sat behind the table. She smiled at me, but her eyes looked tired and sad. She had many strange things on her table. There were old dolls, faded photos, and tiny bottles filled with cloudy liquid. I picked up a wooden amulet. It felt cold, even though the night was warm. The old woman leaned closer and whispered, "For luck, but be careful. Some things are not for everyone." I laughed and put the amulet back. I thought she was just trying to scare me. Then I saw a small mirror. It was dirty and cracked, but I could see my face in it. When I looked into the mirror, I saw someone standing behind me. It was a girl with long black hair and a white dress. She was not one of my friends. I turned around quickly. No one was there. My heart beat fast, but I told myself it was just my imagination. I put the mirror down and walked away from the stall. The old woman watched me go, her eyes following me through the crowd. I found my friends and tried to forget about the mirror. We laughed and ate spicy noodles. But all night I felt like someone was watching me. Every time I looked over my shoulder, I saw nothing. When it was time to go home, I walked past the old woman's stall again. She was gone. The table was empty. The space where her stall had been was now just a shadow on the ground. That night, I could not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the girl from the mirror. I heard soft footsteps in my room. I told myself it was just the wind, but I was not sure. The next morning, I woke up tired. My friends sent me messages joking about the food we ate. I tried to laugh, but I felt cold all day. When evening came, I looked in my mirror before bed. For a moment, I saw the girl again. She stood behind me, her face pale and her eyes wide. She did not move. She just stared at me. I turned around, but my room was empty. My hands shook as I got into bed. I left the lights on all night. The days passed, but I could not forget the girl. I started to see her in other places, in the window of a bus, in the glass of a shop door, even in puddles after the rain. She was always behind me, always watching. I stopped going out at night. I was afraid of mirrors, afraid of my own shadow. One evening, my grandmother saw that. I was scared. She asked me what was wrong. I told her about the girl in the mirror and the old woman at the market. My grandmother listened and nodded. She said, "Some spirits follow those who see them. You must return what you took, even if you only took a look." I did not understand. I had not taken anything from the stall. But then I remembered the mirror. I had touched it. Maybe that was enough. My grandmother took me to a small temple near our house. We brought flowers, incense, and a new mirror as an offering. The monk said a prayer for me and sprinkled water on my head. He told me to close my eyes and think of the girl. He said, "Tell her you are sorry. Tell her to go home." I did as he said. I felt a cold wind pass over me. When I opened my eyes, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. That night, I slept well for the first time in weeks. I did not see the girl in my dreams. I did not hear footsteps in my room. In the morning, I looked in the mirror and saw only myself. Sometimes I still think about the old woman and her stall. I wonder if she is still at the market waiting for someone else to pick up the wrong thing. Now, when I go to the night market, I stay with my friends. I do not wander into dark corners, and I never, ever touch anything that does not belong to me. But sometimes when I'm alone, I feel a chill in the air. I hear a soft whisper like a warning. I remember the girl's eyes, and I know that some things from the night market follow you home, even when you think you are safe. One rainy night, months later, I went back to the market with my friends. I tried not to look for the old woman, but I could not help it. The same dark corner was empty. There was no sign of her stall. My friends pulled me toward a food stand, but I stopped. I thought I saw a flash of white in the shadows, like a dress moving in the wind. I told myself it was nothing. I tried to laugh and eat with my friends, but as we left the market, I felt a cold hand brush my arm. I turned, but no one was there. Only the sound of rain and the distant echo of footsteps behind me. Now, every time I hear the rain or see my reflection at night, I remember the girl from the mirror. I remember the old woman's warning. The market is still crowded and bright, but I know there are things hiding in the dark, waiting for someone to see them. Maybe they are waiting for you. Last summer, my little sister got sick. She had a high fever and could not stop coughing, so my parents took her to the old hospital at the edge of our town in Japan. The building was tall and gray, with paint peeling off the walls. The windows were dirty, and the lights inside flickered. My mother said it was the only hospital nearby, so we had no choice. When we walked in, the air felt cold, even though it was hot outside. The waiting room was almost empty. There was an old woman sitting in the corner, staring at the floor. Nurse with a tired face took my sister's name and told us to sit down. My sister was scared. She held my hand tight and would not let go. After a while, a doctor came out. He wore a white coat, but his eyes looked sad. He called my sister's name and told us to follow him. The hallway was long and quiet. Our footsteps echoed. We passed many doors. Some were closed, but others were open just a little. I could see dark rooms inside with empty beds and old machines. The doctor led us to a small room at the end of the hall. There was a bed, a chair, and a window covered with dust. The doctor checked my sister and said she needed to stay for the night. My mother looked worried, but she agreed. The nurse showed us to a room where my mother and I could sleep. That night, I woke up to a strange sound. It was a soft whisper like someone calling my name. I looked at my mother, but she was asleep. I got up and opened the door. The hallway was dark. I saw a shadow at the end of the hall. It looked like a person, but I could not see the face. I wanted to go back into the room, but the whisper came again. It sounded closer. I walked slowly down the hall. My heart was beating fast. The shadow moved around the corner, and I followed. I passed the room where my sister was sleeping. I looked inside. She was alone, but her eyes were open. She did not look at me. The whisper grew louder. It was coming from the old stairs at the back of the hospital. I went down the stairs. The air was even colder there. I heard the sound of footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, no one was there. I reached the basement. The lights were out, but I could see a faint glow coming from one of the rooms. I walked toward the light. The door was open. Inside, there were many beds, but all of them were empty. The walls were covered with old faded pictures of children. Some were smiling, but some looked sad. In the middle of the room, I saw a little girl in a white hospital gown. Her hair was long and black, and she was facing the wall. I called out to her, but she did not answer. I walked closer. When I was almost beside her, she turned around. Her face was pale and her eyes were dark. She smiled at me, but her smile was strange. She whispered, "Do you want to play with me?" I felt cold all over. I shook my head. She reached out her hand, but I stepped back. She started to cry, but no tears came out. The room grew colder and the lights flickered. I ran out of the room and up the stairs. The whisper followed me, but I did not look back. I rushed into my mother's room and locked the door. I hid under the blanket and waited for morning. When the sun came up, everything felt normal again. My mother woke up and asked if I was okay. I nodded and told her I was just tired. Later that day, my sister's fever went down and the doctor said we could go home. As we walked out, I looked back at the hospital. I saw the little girl in the window, watching us. She did not smile this time. She just stared. At home, I tried to forget about the hospital, but at night I sometimes heard the same whisper in my dreams. Sometimes I saw the little girl standing at the foot of my bed asking me to play. I always said no, but she would not leave. One night I woke up and saw my sister standing by the window. She was looking outside even though it was raining. I asked her what she was doing. She said, "The girl is calling me. She wants me to come back." I pulled her away from the window and told her to go back to bed. She listened, but she looked scared. After that, strange things started to happen in our house. Toys moved by themselves. Doors opened and closed. Sometimes I heard footsteps in the hallway at night. My parents thought it was just the wind, but I knew it was the girl from the hospital. One evening, my sister disappeared. We searched everywhere, but we could not find her. My parents called the police. I remembered what my sister said about the girl calling her. I knew where she had gone. I ran to the hospital. It was late and the building was dark. I went inside and walked down the hallway. I heard the whisper again. It was louder now. I followed it to the basement. The door to the room was open. My sister was there, standing with the little girl in white. They were both holding hands. I called my sister's name, but she did not answer. The little girl looked at me and smiled. She said, "Now you can play with us." I felt the air grow cold. The lights flickered, and the door slammed shut behind me. I tried to run, but I could not move. The little girl reached out her hand. My sister did the same. I felt their cold fingers touch mine. The room spun around me and everything went dark. When I woke up, I was lying in a hospital bed. My parents were there, crying. They said they had found me in the old hospital, but my sister was gone. The doctors said I was sick with a fever, and I must have been dreaming. But I know what I saw. Now every night I hear the whisper. Sometimes, I see the little girl and my sister in my dreams. They are waiting for me, calling me to play. I'm afraid to fall asleep, but I cannot stay awake forever. The sun was setting over the small village of Hoi An in Vietnam. The sky turned orange and pink, casting a warm glow over the old buildings and narrow streets. I had come to this village to relax and enjoy the beautiful scenery, but something felt off. The air was thick with humidity and a strange silence hung in the air. After checking into my small hotel, I decided to explore the village. The streets were quiet and most shops were closed. I wandered down a narrow alley where old lanterns hung from the walls. They swayed gently in the breeze, creating shadows that danced on the ground. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I brushed it off. It was just my imagination. As I walked deeper into the alley, I noticed an old wooden door slightly ajar. Curiosity got the better of me. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dark and dusty. Old furniture was covered with white sheets. It looked like no one had been here for years. I felt a strange pull to explore further. I walked across the creaky wooden floor, my footsteps echoing in the silence. There was a large mirror on the wall, its surface covered in grime. I wiped it with my sleeve, revealing my reflection. But something was off. Behind me, I saw a shadow move. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. Just the empty room. My heart raced. I decided it was time to leave. As I turned to go, I heard a soft whisper. It was faint, like a breeze. "Help me." The voice sent chills through me. I hesitated, then took a deep breath and called out, "Is anyone there?" No answer. Just silence. I felt foolish, standing there in the dark. I stepped back toward the door, but it slammed shut. Panic surged through me. I pushed against the door, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. "Let me out," I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. But no one came. The whisper returned, clearer this time. "Help me." It sounded closer. My heart pounded in my chest. I looked around, searching for a way out. Suddenly, the mirror caught my eye again. This time the surface shimmered. I stepped closer, feeling drawn to it. As I looked into the mirror, the shadows behind me began to take shape. A figure appeared. A girl with long black hair and pale skin. Her eyes were wide and full of sadness. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I am Lin," she replied softly. "I need your help to escape." "Escape? From what?" I asked, confused. "This place is cursed," she said. "I was trapped here long ago. I cannot leave until someone helps me." I felt a mix of fear and sympathy. "What do I need to do?" I asked. "Find the flower by the river," she said. "It will break the curse, but you must hurry. Time is running out." I nodded, determination filling me. I had to help her. I turned to the door, and to my surprise, it swung open. I rushed out into the alley, my heart racing. The village was darker now, the streetlights flickering. I made my way to the river, hoping to find the flower Lin spoke of. The sound of the water grew louder as I approached the riverbank. The moonlight reflected off the water, creating a beautiful but eerie scene. I scanned the area, looking for any sign of the flower. My eyes fell on a patch of bright blue flowers growing near the water's edge. I knelt down, carefully picking one. As I held the flower, I felt a sudden chill. The wind picked up, and the air felt heavy. I looked around, feeling like I was being watched. I quickly turned and ran back to the alley, clutching the flower tightly. When I reached the old building, I pushed the door open again. The room was just as I left it, dark and quiet. "Lin," I called out, hoping she would hear me. I held the flower up to the mirror, hoping it would help. "Please let me go," I said, feeling a mix of fear and hope. The mirror shimmered again, and Lin's face appeared. "You found it," she exclaimed, her eyes lighting up. "Now place the flower on the altar." I looked around the room and spotted a small altar in the corner, covered in dust. I rushed over and placed the flower on it. As I did, the room began to shake. The shadows swirled around me and I felt a rush of wind. "Thank you." Lynn's voice echoed in the room. "You have freed me." The shadows started to lift, and I felt lighter. The mirror glowed brightly, and Lynn smiled at me. "You have done well. I can finally leave this place." As she faded away, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The darkness lifted, and I could see the room clearly now. The dust seemed to settle, and the air felt lighter. I took a deep breath, feeling relieved. I stepped outside, the night air cool against my skin. The village was quiet, but I felt different. I had faced something terrifying and had come out stronger. I walked back through the streets, the lanterns now shining brightly, casting a warm glow. As I left Hoi An, I knew I would never forget Lynn and the old building. It was a night filled with fear, but also a night of courage and hope. It was a cold evening in Busan when my friend Min Jun told me about the old building near the harbor. People said it was haunted. No one wanted to go near it after dark. But Min Jun and I were bored, and we thought the stories were just silly. We decided to check it out. The building stood alone, its walls covered in faded paint and old posters. The windows were broken and the door hung loose on its hinges. We had to push hard to get inside. The air inside was thick and smelled like dust and mold. Every step echoed. I turned on my flashlight. The beam shook a little in my hand. "Let's go upstairs," Min Jun whispered. His voice sounded too loud in the empty place. We climbed the stairs. Each step creaked under our feet. The hallway was long and dark. Old papers and empty bottles were scattered everywhere. There were strange stains on the walls. I tried not to think about what they might be. We reached a room at the end of the hall. The door was half open. I pushed it gently. The room was empty, except for a broken table and some chairs. There was a big crack in the wall. I shined my light around. Something moved in the corner. I froze. "Did you see that?" I asked Min Jun. He nodded but didn't say anything. We heard a soft sound like someone crying. It was faint but clear. It seemed to come from the next room. We looked at each other. I didn't want to go, but Min Jun stepped forward. I followed him. My heart was beating so fast. The next room was darker. The crying was louder now. It sounded like a young girl. I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" The crying stopped. Silence filled the room. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind us. I ran to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Min Jun pulled too, but it was stuck. We banged on the door, but no one answered. Then we heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, dragging footsteps. I pressed my ear to the door. The footsteps stopped right outside. I held my breath. Then a soft voice whispered, "Help me." It was right next to my ear, but no one was there. Min Jun grabbed my arm. His hand was shaking. "Let's get out of here," he said. I nodded. We looked for another way out. There was a small window, high up on the wall. We dragged a chair over and climbed up. Min Jun went first. I pushed him up, then tried to climb myself. As I pulled myself up, I looked back. In the dark, I saw a shadow move across the floor. It looked like a girl, her hair covering her face. She stared at me. I felt cold all over. I scrambled through the window and fell to the ground outside. We ran all the way home. We didn't talk much. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the girl's shadow in the dark. The next day, Min Jun called me. He said he kept hearing someone whisper his name. I heard it too, sometimes late at night. My parents said it was just a bad dream, but I knew it was real. A week later, we met at the playground. Min Jun looked tired. He said he saw the girl in his room the night before. She stood by his bed watching him. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. She whispered, "Come back." He covered his ears, but he could still hear her. I started to see her too. Sometimes in the mirror, sometimes in the shadows. She always looked sad. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she just stared. I tried to tell myself it was my mind playing tricks, but it didn't stop. One night, I woke up and saw her standing at the end of my bed. She didn't move. She didn't speak. I hid under my blanket, shaking. When I looked again, she was gone, but I could hear her crying somewhere in the house. Minjun said we should go back to the building and try to help her. Maybe she needed something. Maybe she just wanted someone to listen. I was scared, but I agreed. We couldn't live like this forever. We went back one afternoon when the sun was still up. The building looked even worse in the daylight. We found the same room. The door was open. The air was cold, much colder than outside. We called out, "We're here to help. What do you want?" At first, nothing happened. Then the crying started again. It was louder this time and closer. The shadow appeared in the corner. She looked at us, her eyes empty and dark. "We're sorry," I said. "We shouldn't have come here at night. What do you want?" She raised her hand and pointed to the crack in the wall. We walked over and looked inside. There was something hidden in the crack. I reached in and pulled out a small necklace. It was old and dirty, but I could see a name on it, Jinnah. The crying stopped. The air felt lighter. The shadow faded away. We left the necklace on the table and backed out of the room. As we left the building, I felt a warm breeze on my face. For the first time in days, I felt calm. That night, I didn't see the girl. I didn't hear her crying. Minjun called and said the same thing. We both slept well for the first time in a long time. We never went back to the building. Sometimes when I walk by the harbor, I think about Jinnah. I hope she found peace. I hope she's not alone anymore. But sometimes late at night, I still hear a soft whisper in the dark. And I wonder if she ever really left. It was raining the night I got lost in Tokyo. I was new to the city, and everything felt too big and too bright. After dinner with a friend, I went down into the subway to head home. The station was almost empty. The lights flickered. I checked the map, but all the names looked the same to me. I picked a train at random and hoped for the best. The train was cold and quiet. I sat by the window and watched the tunnels fly by. After a few stops, I realized I was alone. There were no other passengers. The lights outside grew dimmer. I pressed the button to get off at the next station. The train stopped. The doors slid open. I stepped out into a strange station. It was very old. The tiles were cracked. The walls were stained with water. There were no signs, no maps, and no people. The only sound was the rain outside, echoing down the stairs. I tried to go back to the train, but the doors closed and it sped away. I was alone. My phone had no signal. I walked along the platform calling out for help, but no one answered. I found a stairway and climbed up, hoping to find an exit. At the top, there was a long, dark hallway. The lights buzzed and flickered. I walked slowly, feeling uneasy. My footsteps echoed. I thought I heard someone behind me, but when I turned, there was nothing. I kept walking. I passed old posters peeling off the walls. Some were for movies I had never heard of. Some were for concerts from many years ago. There was dust everywhere. I started to feel cold. Suddenly, I heard a soft voice. It sounded like a child. It said, "Help me." I stopped. The voice came from the shadows at the end of the hallway. I called out, "Who's there?" But no one answered. I took a step, closer. A little girl stepped out. She wore a white dress. Her hair was long and covered her face. She held a broken doll. She whispered, "Please help me find my mother." Her voice was thin and sad. I felt sorry for her. I knelt down and asked, "Where did you see your mother last?" She pointed down another dark tunnel. I hesitated, but she looked so lost. I followed her. The tunnel was colder than before. My breath made white clouds in the air. The girl walked in front of me, never looking back. I tried to talk to her, but she did not answer. The darkness pressed in on us. We reached another platform. This one was even older. The lights were almost gone. I saw old benches and a ticket booth covered in cobwebs. The girl stopped and turned to me. She lifted her head. Her face was very pale. Her eyes were empty and dark. She said, "They left me here. I waited for so long." Her voice echoed. I felt a chill run down my spine. I wanted to run, but my legs would not move. Suddenly, I saw other shapes in the shadows. More children. They all wore old clothes. Their faces were pale and sad. They stared at me. I felt their eyes on me. The air grew heavy. The girl reached out her hand. Her fingers were cold when they touched mine. She said, "Stay with us. We are so lonely." The other children came closer. I tried to pull away, but they held me tight. Their hands were cold and strong. I screamed for help, but no one came. The lights flickered and went out. I felt myself pulled into the darkness. The children whispered around me, "Stay. Don't leave. Play with us." I don't remember how long I was there. Time felt strange. I saw flashes of the subway, the empty platforms, the cold tunnels. I heard the children laugh and cry. Sometimes I saw their faces close to mine, their eyes wide and empty. Then one day, I heard a train. It sounded far away. I tried to run toward the sound. The children tried to hold me back, but I broke free. I ran down the tunnel, following the noise. I saw the lights of a train coming. I waved my arms and shouted. The train stopped and the doors opened. I jumped inside. The car was full of people. They stared at me as if I was a ghost. I was shaking and cold. When I got off at the next stop, I ran up the stairs and out into the rain. The city lights looked warm and safe. I never went back to that station. I never told anyone what happened. Sometimes at night I hear the voices of those children in my dreams. They call my name. They ask me to come back and play. I always wake up cold and scared. I wonder if that place is real or if it was just a nightmare. But sometimes when I ride the subway late at night, I see a little girl in a white dress standing alone on the platform. She never looks at me, but I feel her eyes watching. I try not to think about what would have happened if I had stayed. I try to forget the cold hands and the empty eyes. But the memory never really goes away. It follows me, like a shadow, every time I step onto a train. Last winter was very cold in Seoul. My job kept me late, so I often took the last subway train home. The station near my office was old and quiet at night. Most people had already left. The shops were closed. Only a few lights were on. The air felt heavy and cold, and everything echoed in the empty hall. One night I was rushing down the stairs to catch the last train. My phone buzzed with a message from my mom, telling me to come home soon. I smiled and texted her back. When I looked up, I noticed something strange. There was a woman standing at the far end of the platform. She wore a long black coat and had long hair covering her face. She did not move. She just stood there, facing the tracks. I thought maybe she was waiting for the train like me. I looked at the clock. The train would arrive in 5 minutes. I walked closer to the yellow line and glanced at her. She did not look up. I tried to ignore her, but I felt uneasy. Suddenly, I heard a soft humming sound. It was coming from her direction. It was a sad, slow tune. I could not understand the words. The sound made me feel cold inside. I wanted to move away, but my feet felt stuck. A minute later, the lights in the station flickered. The humming stopped. I looked at the woman again. She was gone. I blinked, confused. I looked up and down the platform. There was no one there. I wondered if I imagined her. The train arrived. The doors opened with a loud beep. I stepped inside. The car was empty. I sat down and closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them, I saw the woman again. She was sitting at the other end of the car. Her face was hidden by her hair. She did not move. She did not make a sound. The train started moving. I felt my heart beating fast. I wanted to get off, but there were still 3 stops before my home. I tried to calm down. Maybe she was just a tired worker, just like me. The train passed through a tunnel. The lights flickered again. I looked at the woman. She was gone. I stood up and looked around. The car was empty. I sat back down, feeling scared. At the next stop, the doors opened. No one got on. I looked out the window and saw only darkness. The train moved again. I checked my phone, but there was no signal underground. Suddenly, I heard the humming again. It was right behind me. I turned slowly. The woman was standing in the aisle just a few steps away. Her head was down. Her hair was long and black, hiding her face. She raised her hand and pointed at me. I could not move. My body felt frozen. The humming got louder. It hurt my ears. I closed my eyes and covered my ears with my hands. When I opened my eyes, she was gone again. The train stopped at my station. I ran out as fast as I could. I looked back, but the woman was not there. I hurried up the stairs and out into the cold night. My breath came out in white clouds. I ran, all the way home. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about the woman. Was she real? Was she a ghost? In Korea, people say ghosts can appear in lonely places, especially at night. Some say they are souls who cannot rest. The next day, I told my friend at work what happened. She looked worried. She said there was an old story about the subway station. Many years ago, a woman was pushed onto the tracks late at night. She died and her spirit never left. People say she waits for the last train, hoping someone will help her. After that, I tried to avoid the late train. If I had to ride it, I stayed close to other people. But sometimes, when the platform was quiet, I heard the soft humming again. It always came from the far end, where the shadows were thick. One night, I had to work late again. I missed the second-to-last train, so I had no choice but to take the last one. The station was almost empty. I hurried down the stairs, trying not to look at the dark corners. On the platform, I saw a young man waiting. I felt a bit better. I stood near him. He smiled at me and nodded. The train came and we both got on. We sat across from each other. The car was quiet. At the next stop, the doors opened. The woman in black stepped inside. She did not look at us. She walked to the far end and stood near the door. The young man looked at me. His face turned pale. The train moved forward. The lights flickered. The woman began to hum. The sound was soft, but it filled the car. The young man stood up and walked toward her. He asked, "Are you okay?" She did not answer. He reached out to touch her shoulder. Suddenly she turned around. Her face was white and empty. There were no eyes, no mouth, just smooth skin. The young man screamed and fell backward. The woman glided toward him. I watched, frozen in fear. The lights went out for a moment. When they came back, the woman was gone. The young man was lying on the floor, shaking. I helped him up. He asked, "Did you see her face?" I nodded, too scared to speak. We got off at the next station and ran upstairs together. We promised never to take the last train again. After that night, I stopped working late. I never saw the woman again, but sometimes when I pass that station, I hear her humming. It reminds me to go home early, before the shadows grow long and the last train comes.